All right, so I'm sitting here in front of a banding wheel. It's a lot easier to do this next part with a banding wheel. If you don't have a banding wheel, because you didn't check one out, I'm all out of them. I don't have any more. But you can try to find some kind of turntable that rotates. You want something that you can do this with, that you can kind of spin in a circle. Now, this pot is not totally level or even, which is okay. I made it without a banding wheel, so that's kind of the byproduct of that. I'm going to be using my paddle today to try to kind of level things out and to get things a little bit more even. So when I'm paddling, I won't be talking because it's hard to hear both. But the first thing I need to do is kind of figure out where do I need to paddle it, where is it off center most, what do I need to shave, can I get the top sitting level? So first I'm going to just kind of look at it as it spins and try to identify certain parts that need to be worked on. So I've got like a part of my shoulder here that needs to be lifted up a little bit, so I'm going from the inside and kind of lifting up a little bit. Let me get this in the middle of the wheel. This banding wheel is pretty wobbly too, so it isn't the best banding wheel to use. I'm using my finger to make some marks where it looks like it's the most off center. And I'll see if I can get it to spin a little bit more evenly. It looks like one side is predominantly off center, so I'm gonna move it in a little bit that way, and yeah. So that's about as close to centered as this pot's gonna get. I can get it a lot closer by paddling, so I'm gonna start doing that. I've got my hand on the inside. I'm just paddling and lifting up a little bit. And now I'm just trying to straighten out the shoulder and figure out where it needs to go down and where it maybe needs to go up a little bit. See, on this side it's rounder than it is on this side, so I can do one of two things. I can try to paddle this side in, or I can try to stretch this side out. Let me feel how soft it is on the inside. I don't think it's really going to be possible to stretch this out too much because it is getting dry towards the bottom. So I'm using my finger on the inside and just giving it a little bit of stretch out on the side that looks like it needs it. And then I'll probably end up paddling the other side in as well. This process is kind of a trial and error process. I would say that this is the most important probably and most difficult part next to the way you start of trying to get this thing to look symmetrical. Now, this would have been a lot more symmetrical if I would have been using a banding wheel the whole time I was working, because it's easier to check in the round how even it is when you can have it spin. But it'll still turn out passively as a pot. Different kind of work. I'm gonna get this bottom half done to where I like it. Right now I'm just using my rib, trying to smooth out some of the dents and scratches. It gives me a little better view of what the shape looks like. If I can kind of smooth the surface, I can see what parts just don't look right. So I'm using my metal rib. You can see I'm not using any water yet. I will end up using water to smooth this out. But this first part of the process, I'm really just trying to get any lumps out and trying to make the thing be as symmetrical as possible. Any spots that aren't symmetrical, I'll be able to shave down a little bit. All right. So the bottom half of my pot is looking okay. It's really just this top piece that I need to really kind of fiddle with. On the actual top itself, I want to check and make sure that it's as even as possible. So I'm going to try to get this thing as centered as it can be. Again, I'm making marks around the outside where I think it's widest, and then pushing it in a little bit. It's easier from working in the middle of the banding wheel, or as close to the middle as I can. With an imperfect pot, it's going to be on an imperfect center. It's probably as close as I'm going to get right now. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rib and start trying to really blend this rim and smooth out this rim and try to get it as even as I can at the same time as I'm smoothing it out. So I'm using my rib to kind of scrape away some of the excess. Usually if your clay's a little stiffer, when you start working on it like this, it actually kind of softens up. It kind of wakes up a little bit. And you start working on the outside. So now I'm just using this curve of my rib here to kind of fit into this curve and to scrape away any excess. And I'll slowly work down to the connection of the rim to the shoulder. I'm left-handed, so I'm using my left hand. I guess if you were right-handed, you might be on this side working. So now, I've got this curve decent, and what I need to work on is this shoulder area here. So first, I'm going to just try using just this rib. I'm using the corner of the rib where it's kind of like a flat space, which is kind of what that is, and it kind of makes the same curve that I'm working on. I'm going to see if I can just kind of clean it up with just using this rib. I could use the wooden rib the same way, or I could start using my trimming tools to get a little carving going on. But for now, I'm just going to try to use just my metal rib. Okay, and so I don't want my pot to be leaning over to the side, so I'm holding the base, and when I find out which side is kind of leaning towards me, I do that by making a mark. Normally you would use your pin tool. You can see I've got my scratching tool here. I can make a mark with my pin tool on the rim, maybe on the side of the pot. And if all these line up, I can see that either this side is too far out or my pot is kind of leaning this way. And they're all kind of on this side, so the pot is kind of tilted that way. So I'm gonna hold it from its base and kind of push in on the bottom a little bit and try to get the whole thing just kind of lean. So I'm holding the base down and just a little lean. There we go, a little lean. And that makes it spin a little bit more even. That looks better. I'll go back to a little bit of paddling for my shoulder. I'm going to clean up the inside a little bit, this rim, so that it doesn't look so messy. I've got to level my top out. My top coil wasn't totally level, so I want the top of this pot to be level, so I'll level that out as well. Before I'm doing that, I'm just kind of smoothing this inside where it's a little uneven. It's hard to paddle the inside, so I'm using the rib at kind of a right angle and just scraping away a layer of clay, and that's just kind of smoothing out some of the uneven surface. I want a smooth surface on this rim as well. I can't help that maybe the inside of the shoulders would be a little bumpy on the inside. No one's gonna see that, but they could see this part. So I do want to make this look as clean as possible. Put a little water on the inside, and I'm going to smooth it one more time. I'm going to look over the top and see if I can make it a little more round, if it looks like it's oval anywhere or a little flat. I want to make that inside look nice and round. The water just makes it easier for my finger to kind of slide around. That looks pretty round. And then with the water on there, it's going to make it easier for when I lay the rib down sideways for me to smooth out the surface, so there's not as many scratch marks. The water creates a little bit of a surface mud on the edge of my rib right here, and that mud kind of fills in any gaps or scratch marks that I made by kind of cleaning it up. And this is just to make the inside a little bit smoother. I'll go over this again, like a last smoothing step, but just a little bit of work in progress there. I'll do the same thing on the outside of the rib, of the neck. All right, now to get this top level. This will be tricky for this pot because my banding wheel's a little wobbly. This is a banding wheel I made out of spare parts a couple years ago. Cut off a layer of the top. I'm just trying to see, I'm drawing a straight line so I know where it's off. If I don't want to cut off that much, what I can do is the spots where it's lower, I kind of leave those. The spots where it's higher, I can shave those down, and I can kind of shave this down. I think many of you brought one of these tools home with you. It's called the Sureform. It's a really useful tool for cleaning up pots. Especially like if I'm trying to level something out like this, I can go to the spots that aren't level and just kind of run it over it like this, and it kind of levels it out. And it makes it pretty easy to level the surface of a pot or a shape because you can just drag this plane across it, and it creates a much more level surface. So I'm going to be using this tool. I'm going to leave some of these outside my classroom. And if you want to come in and grab one to borrow one, that's okay. If you don't have one of these, I'll show you another technique that does something similar. But this really is the better tool for the job. Like I said, I'm just trying to level my top out. I just want to get it close. I know that many of you guys find it hard to spin the wheel and cut a straight line and not mess it up. So I'm trying to show you a way that is different than that. That is a lot closer. Take this and just kind of run it along the side here and shave off some extra that I see. There we go. So I've got my top a little more level now. It's like I said, it's not perfect. But neither is this pot. Okay, so again with my Sureform, this is where I can start looking at the shape itself and seeing if there's any areas that I want to clean up this way as well. I can clean up the bottom edge here by spinning this and kind of going around it. This will kind of give me a nice straight edge. And kind of shave off any of the little bumps or spots I didn't want. There we go. I can also shave this part down here and hold it the correct way, I guess. There we go. All right, so I still have some areas like on the side here where it's dented, bumpy, a little scratchy, and this is where I need to clean those areas up. Now, there's a couple different ways I can do this. I would probably use my Sureform, and when this gets a little drier, I would shave the entire pot down, maybe like a little bit. So I go along the pot like this, and just shave the whole thing a little bit. And this is kind of gives me a nice smooth surface, a level surface rather. It kind of planes it, so if there's any high spots or low spots, it kind of evens those out. And you can see I'm just trying to go systematically around it. It's going to rough it up a little bit, and then I'll smooth it out with my metal rib again. And that's going to give me a much more clean silhouette or profile line. I can also still take my paddle, and if I see any spots maybe that look like they need to be paddled, the paddle is still an effective tool. But I can also, to get this surface level, use my scratching tool and some water in my rib. So I've got this bottom part here that I want to be more level. You can see I'm going to go around the pot, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to scratch kind of the whole pot. So I'll fast forward through this to get the idea. I want to Now that I've scratched my pot quite thoroughly, I'll take a damp sponge. I don't want the water to run down too much. I'm going to kind of brush over the scratch part with my damp sponge so that it's kind of holding water on the pot. It'll hold a lot more water because I scratched it. I've increased the surface area significantly. If you're in my class during the coronavirus stay at home, we did this on a previous project where we scratched it, our sculptures, we scratched them and then smoothed them out. We're doing the same thing here. So, put my water on there. I want to let it sit for a couple seconds. So it can kind of soften, let that water kind of work its way into the surface. And then I will be able to clean it up a little bit. And I would do this over the entire pot. You can see I did this part with my Sureform, and I'll be able to do some smoothing afterwards. Now that it's sat a little bit, I can take my rib and I can kind of push in, and I can go up the side of the pot pretty firmly, and that's going to scrape off a good amount of mud. What this will do is it'll end up kind of leveling out the surface and making it less bumpy and wavy, because I've kind of scratched through those waves, and I'm trying to use a uniform part of my tool to kind of get a nice, clean, smooth surface. So since my coils went this way, they went horizontally, I'm smoothing vertically. That's going to help blend the coils together, but it also is probably the direction that you have bumps. You probably have more bumps that are in the shape that you put the coils on. So to get rid of those, we want to go the opposite way, which is what I'm doing now. And I'm trying to remove a decent layer of clay, this muddy layer that I've kind of created. Now, if my walls were really thin, this might kind of make weak spots, but because I had thick coils, I probably got a good ½ an inch everywhere on this pot of thickness, maybe a little bit less. So I'm not too much worried about going through the pot in any one place. This will also soften your clay a little bit by wetting it like that, so that if you do need to stretch it out afterwards from the inside, it will be a little bit easier. I'm just going to check my bottom, see if there's anything I want to change. I see a subtle dent right here. So from the inside, I'm using my rib and seeing if I can kind of stretch that out a little bit, see if it'll work out. If not, again, this is where I could do this same process again or use my Surform. Got my Surform here. If you've got water on the surface of your pot, you don't want to use the Surform. It sticks to the clay. You want to really get all the water off before you use the Surform. So I'm going to go around this again and just try to get any water that I might have missed. The Surform works best when the clay is pretty dry. We don't want it to gum up in the tool. We want it to kind of come off as like little thin shavings. If it's wet, it gums up in the tool, and then you have to push harder, and it ends up not helping you make a smooth surface. It ends up making a rougher surface. So you can see, like as I'm doing now, I'm just kind of going up the pot, removing any clay that'll come off, trying to get back down to some nice dry clay. Symmetrical than when I started, which is good, but it's not where I want it to be yet. I still have some wobbling up here that I don't like. And this looks okay. I'm not super happy with my shoulder yet either, but I'll work on both of those. I'm going to use, you could use your wood rib. I'm going to use my paddle edge because it's a right angle. I'm just going to try to see if I can figure out if this thing is super level or where it's not. I'm making a line. What this line tells me is by having a line, it tells me what is higher or lower in relationship to that line. So just making that line doesn't be perfect. Lets me know it's a little low right here. I'll lift that up. Be careful that you always want to compress the clay. If I'm lifting up on the inside, I don't want to just lift up. I actually want to push back down against it, just so that I'm always trying to blend the clay towards itself and not trying to stretch it. Because this was made in coils, it's going to want to try to split or crack along those coil lines, and I don't want that. So I'm always trying to push up to get a really smooth surface. I can take my scratching tool and just very lightly, you can use lighter now because I'm not trying to really change too much, scratch the surface where I did the Surforming, because there are still little dents and stuff here. I don't know if they show up on the video, but I can see them with my eyes. And you can see I'm scratching it very lightly. It's also where the banding wheel comes in handy. Go. So now I've got the surface of my pot, if not smooth, I've got it uniform all the way up to that shoulder. I'm going to do the same thing I just did with the scratching on the shoulder and on the neck, and I'm going to smooth it out the same way to try to get a more uniform, less kind of mottled or bumpy surface. I'm pretty happy with how the sides look the silhouette or the profile. It has a pretty clean line. I know that my pot is a little womp, like it sits a little crooked, but I'm okay with that. It's a handmade pot, and this is not something that it's going to be perfect, especially if you didn't make it with a banding wheel. Okay, so I think this can be day 4. What I'm going to be doing tomorrow is I'm going to make some lines for my decoration. We're going to start thinking about how we're going to decorate it. I'm also going to attach some handles. So last thing I'll do is I'll kind of set my stencil up to my pot. You'll see, again, it doesn't fit my stencil exactly. It doesn't. I guess I didn't do a good job if you want to judge it by those standards, but it really does fit the proportions, which is what's really important, that the neck is a proportional size to the foot, the foot is the proportional size to the body. It did shrink a lot more down here because it is significantly harder here than it is there, so it probably was closer to here, but it definitely wasn't that close to there. So if anything, I think I might have gone a little wide. If I brought this shoulder in a little bit, everything else would go in and it would fit. So I think if anything, I made it a little too wide there, but it very much fits the proportions of my stencil. And it fits all the way around for the most part. It doesn't jump around too much. And it looks a lot more symmetrical now than it did before. It's still got a little wobble to it. If you want to spend more time trying to fix those wobbles and making it as straight as possible, I am happy that you want to do that. This is just a pot to demonstrate how to do it. This is about 3.5, 4 hours of work. Okay, so in the next video, like I said, I'll be probably putting some amphora handles on it. On the side, I might put side handles for a hydra. I'm not sure which one this will be. And then I'll start talking about how we're going to plan out and do some sgraffito work for our decoration. Okay, thanks for watching.